Welcome to the Language Fuel podcast. Our mission is to fuel the teaching and learning of languages worldwide. I'm your host, Joanna Smith. Right, so this morning we have an interview with Michael MacKinven. And Michael is the author of Kanji Pro, the easy way to remember kanji. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna.
Thanks for taking the time to talk with us. So you have written this book, Kanji Pro, and I'd like to talk about that in a minute. But first of all, I'd like to just go way back and ask how you first got into language learning. So obviously you must have learned Japanese at somewhere down the line. So do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, sure. So language learning, I didn't actually learn a language at high school. I started learning in America, actually. I was travelling over there and met a friend.
After you'd finished high school?
That's correct, yep. Mm-hmm. So I'd started university. Mm-hmm. I did 3 years of university and then took what was initially just going to be a summer holiday off to go to America on a student work abroad program. Ended up being almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Went over there and met this amazing guy who, Tyler was his name, and he was learning Italian, and he'd actually been to Italy, and that was just so fascinating for me. I was like, wow, I've never really been exposed to that. Mm-hmm. So that was really exciting for me. I went to Japan on the way back to New Zealand, and so I was about 22 at that point.
Yep.
It was really cool. I was able to speak sounds that had no meaning to me, but the other people understood them, and so that was very exciting. So yeah, came back to university, another couple of years there to finish my degree, which was agricultural science. Mm-hmm. Did a bit of Japanese then, and went back to Japan. So most of my language was learned on the ground in
Japan itself. Yeah, wow, doing it the full-on way.
Yeah.
And how long was it in Japan till you felt that you were sort of able to carry on a decent conversation with people? What would you say?
I felt, because I had studied, I had a base. I had some grammar from university, which was really valuable. So I'd encourage anyone that's going to learn language to get that formal learning start as a base, because your improvement becomes so much faster. But within probably, I guess I could have a very, very basic conversation based on what I'd learnt, but I really, in hindsight, knew nothing. But it's probably 6 months or so I was able to sort of, have a bit of a basic conversation and maybe go out and have a few beers with teachers and stuff like that.
Fantastic. So what made you decide to be a teacher? Because I think you then were teaching English, weren't you, in Japan at that stage?
Yes, I was. Yep, I went on the JET program, so it was really just a means for me to be able to go to Japan. So I didn't plan to be a teacher per se.
Right.
It was a way of being over
travelling and
that's correct.
Having a ticket to okay.
That's it.
With the JETS opportunity, I'm not super familiar with it. Do they provide sort of initial teacher training before you get there, or on the job as you're there? Or
yeah, a little bit. We say a little, very little. We get a couple of days in Tokyo, and then we're pretty much thrown in the deep end. Right. But that was cool. We had a lot of people around, a lot of a good support network.
Right.
And because we were ALT, so assistant language teachers, so we weren't actually the primary teacher in the classroom.
Right.
So we had a lot of leeway as well.
Helping out with the other.
That's
fantastic. That's a good way to do it, isn't it? So, and how long were you in Japan at that stage?
3 years teaching originally, and then another 4.5 years as a CIR, Coordinator of International Relations.
Wow. All right. So before we get to that, so a few years teaching. What are some of the highlights of your teaching years there?
It was a wonderful time, and the highlights were, there were lots and lots of highlights, and that's why I stayed for 8.5 years. But probably the smiles, you work hard and you give everything, and you get those little rewards of like a smile from a student, or some nice comments from a teacher that you've done a good job.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're downtown in the supermarket and a parent comes up to you and says that you've done some amazing things for their children, and things like that. I mean, that's not the reason. You're not doing it for those rewards and for those comments, but they're there and they motivate you, and you feel really good about it. And I'm a very competitive person, and there was a recitation contest that we would do every year. So I was that was my little baby. They put me in charge of that, which was really cool. So
and this is the Japanese students reciting something in English.
That's correct. Okay. Yep. So they had to. It was pretty tough. They had to memorize a whole speech, and it was about a 3-minute speech from memory. and then they would get on the stage and they'd do that. So every student that's I taught for the period that I was there placed in this competition. So that was
well
it
done.
was like, got it. That was probably the biggest well done feeling that I had, I guess. Yeah.
And I think both of those things, so that sort of motivational thing of seeing students, be pleased and their parents be pleased, and also seeing them succeed in what they're doing, I think they're pretty generic to most language teachers. When your student sits an exam and does really well, that's very, very satisfying. So those are two key things for a lot of teachers, definitely. So then you finished teaching and you had this what was it, international relations job. Tell me about that. That's very interesting.
So there's 2 roles under the JET program, which is the Japan Exchange Teaching Program.
Yes.
The main role is ALT, which is Assistant Language Teacher.
Yes.
And the second role is a CAR.
Okay.
Which
so
is
it's
a
still
coordinator.
within the same organisation?
That's correct.
Right.
Yep. Probably a ratio, I don't know, just guessing, but maybe 1 in 5 or perhaps even 1 in 10 are CARs.
Okay.
And so you go over, your role is to do translation work, interpreting work, do a bit of teaching as well.
Yep.
So assist, depending on the role that you've got and the size of the organisation.
Yes.
You might be doing diplomatic type work as well.
Wow.
We set up a school exchange, so brought kids from Japan back to New Zealand and vice versa.
Oh,
so,
fantastic.
yeah, a lot of that sort of stuff.
Wow. So how long had you actually originally intended to be in Japan?
Originally a year or so, I think.
Okay.
1 year, 2 years, and we'll carry on.
It goes on and on and on.
Just loved it, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So after the 3 years, that was the end, because back then you could only do 3 years on the JET program. Now you can do a lot more.
Okay.
Back then it was just 3. And I said, now's the time. My period in Japan's over. So I came back to New Zealand, but I still felt a little bit unsettled. I didn't feel like my work had been done. And so I went back and then did the
other.
The 4.5 as CIR.
Wow. So what about the decision then finally to move back to New Zealand after that stage? So we're sort of 8 and a bit years down the track now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was really, life over there was just, it was incredible. It was absolutely amazing. I had this beautiful 2-story house right on a wonderful white sand beach, similar to perhaps Mount Maunganui in New Zealand or Gold Coast. It was just the most amazing place. Surfing every day and had status as a teacher, because teachers are very respected in Japan. So had this wonderful status in society, and it was just the most amazing time. But I also knew in my heart that I had a bigger calling, I had a bigger mission in life, and I had to ask the question, am I going to be able to achieve my greatest potential in this position where I am? And I was in the countryside in Japan, so I had a certain glass ceiling above me.
Sure.
And often glass ceilings are in our mind. We have to face up to that fact, but in this case it was a glass ceiling of physical location and my the vocation that I was doing at the time, and the places where I was doing it. So it was like, a conscious decision. Where do I want to retire? Where do I want to spend the rest of my life? It's time. My time's come to come back. I had a good stint the 8.5 years, and I wanted to move on and do other things with my life as well. I had a passion for these other things, so came back to New Zealand in 2004.
Okay, right. So several years since then. So let's move on to Kanji Pro then, this fantastic book that you've published. It's a very big book, very thick, lots of pages there. I'm sure it would have taken, been a really huge project to put that together. How did that baby come about? Did you sort of invent, have the vision in your head, or you want to share some techniques that were useful for you, or what's that about?
Yeah, it really has been a baby.
I can imagine.
For a long time I was like, no, can't let this baby go, but now it's like, go, now I want it to go, get away from me. But it's originally it was quite a selfish motive. There was started so I went to a very high level of proficiency, past the Japanese Nordoku Shiken, which is the Japanese proficiency test. So I got the level 1 of that, so that's the top level.
Fabulous. And
found that even though theoretically I had a high level of proficiency, I couldn't actually write anything, because that proficiency test is actually only multi-choice.
I see. Right.
Yeah, it's just you don't have speaking as well, so you've only got your listening and multiple choice on that, and you've got your grammar and all those sort of things, which again is multiple choice. So you don't have to write anything. So I found,
so it wasn't active; it was more the passive sort of thing.
Yes. Yep. But there was no other tests available for Westerners, or that I know of. So I thought, okay, what can I do? And then I found the Japanese test for kanji proficiency, which is called kanken. And so I started doing that, and I found that even though I had level 1 of the Noryoku, of the Japanese proficiency, I had to go back to level 7 of Kanken.
Far lower down the chain.
Exactly, starts at 10 and goes up to level 1. Okay. So I'm like sort of way down the bottom, and even though I thought, wow, I'm level 1 here. And so there's 2,000 characters, bit over 2,000 characters, 2,100 and something that you have to learn. And so it's a huge amount of rote learning. Japanese kids spend all their summer holidays writing these kanji out, and these for proficient, like for native speakers. So for me, it was like, I've got to have a different way of learning these. Yeah. And so, I
suppose learning it as an adult as well is a little bit different than as a child. It's
precisely. So you've got to use a systematic, you need a lot more logic as an adult learner, of course.
Sure.
So from the year of, sort of the age of about 12 or 13, the way we learn changes. So needed to have a systematic, methodical, logical way to learn them. Otherwise, it's just impossible. You just rote learning them and you forget them and you go back and there's no water to it. Yeah. So started using James Heisig, which is a popular book. Came out in the 1970s. Very left brain. I won't go into the all the details, the semantics about how they work, but started using that. Then went on to a book by Professor Kenneth Henschel, who was at Canterbury University, an English gentleman, and then merged those two books into
So they're quite different
Kanji Pro.
techniques.
Different techniques.
And you brought them together in a way that suits you, I'm assuming?
That's correct. Yeah. Yep. So it's a mnemonic learning approach. So it suits learners that like right brain learning approaches. So see things like using the memory techniques and associating different things to be able to learn. And so it's not a natural way to learn. We have to learn how to learn with memory techniques.
Specific techniques.
Exactly. Yeah, but we do know it's proven. Dominic O'Brien, all the world memory champions, they all use memory techniques. And so they work. We know they work, but it's just whether we're prepared to put in the time to learn those techniques. And so there's a lot of pros and cons and of using these techniques, but for me it worked. And so it was like, if I had had this book when I was learning, it would have saved me probably 1,000 hours at least, more than 1,000 hours. So then it went from a very selfish, I want to come up with something that's going to help me to learn, to I want to help others to be able to learn. So
save them those 1,000 hours.
Precisely. So I'm thinking, okay, if we can save 1,000 students 1,000 hours, we've released 1 million hours, 1 million hours in society. What can society do with 1 million hours? Communicate and connect with people, and so the motivation and the inspiration change from that more to helping others.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations that it's finally, not finally, it's been out for a while, but it's a, as you say, it's a baby when you're writing a book like that. So to birth it and launch it is fantastic.
Thank you.
Well done. So Kanji Pro is not the only thing you have on the go in terms of businesses and selling that. You're also, I understand, the director of a couple of other companies, which is amazing in and of itself. And I understand that your cross-cultural experience is still being used a little bit in your business life. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is. So I've got a number of property-related businesses. I do even now work with Japanese clients, so we're doing seminars up in Japan for a long time. I haven't done them for a couple of years now. But
and are you running that in Japanese yourself?
In Japanese,
fantastic.
Yep. So I stand on stage in Japan and present on property investing, and so still look after those clients. Got a number of clients who purchase properties and looking after them. Do property management. So in property management, we deal with a lot of different tenants, from Māori tenants and Tongan tenants and Samoan tenants and Indian people, many different cultures. And so the experience in Japan, learning another language as well, has really put me in a strong position to be able to see through the words that people speak, and to say that just because they might not necessarily be totally fluent in English doesn't mean they're dumb, doesn't mean that they're
exactly right.
Illiterate or anything else. And so being able to see through that and connect with them as another person.
Yes.
And so it's really put my business in a strong position. And also being going up to Japan as well, and just my whole paradigm, my whole way I viewed the world changed. And so that came from, of course, knowing a language, because you can get a lot deeper into the culture. But I do remember when I first went up there, I had just read a book by a guy by the name of Dale Carnegie, and it was called How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Yes, very famous book, that
Most amazing book. Yes. And he talked about being selfless, thinking of the other people, about talking less and listening more. Yes. He talked about things of honesty and all these different things, connecting with people, and it was just the most amazing book. And I was like, wow, it opened my eyes. I went to Japan, and discovered that the people of Japan were so much, they epitomized the person that Dale Carnegie had been talking about, the Japanese culture. And so I use that to this day of how to organize my teams, how to run my business, how to be efficient in my communication with people, and all those things. So yeah, it's been the most amazing journey, and it's made me a lot stronger and a lot better as a leader and as a person in my business. And yeah, so it's
fantastic. I think it's amazing. You had a specific language to be learning and culture to be learning, which is Japanese, but like you say, that the same types of skills that you learned in that one course of experience and study is transferable to multicultures. Just cross-cultural communications becomes much easier when you understand the principles behind it. So I think that's fantastic, and that's an encouragement for anybody learning a language. It might not be about that specific language that's going to take you on forever in all of your career, but the skills and the understanding that you gain from having that experience is what counts. So
absolutely,
that's a wonderful example. Well, before we go, I just wondered if you would mind sharing with us 3 pieces of advice for those who are just starting out on their language teaching journey. A lot of our listeners are in the early phases of their career, or maybe even there'll be listeners who feel that they also, like you, have a Kanji Pro in them, some sort of idea or book that they feel they might be able to offer the world. So do you have any pieces of advice for them?
You did ask me for this, and I'll put 3 quickly scribbled down on a bit of paper here. The first is to be firm but to be flexible, and to shape yourself to be like a nikau palm, to be like a strong tree, like a coconut tree that will is firm in your principles and in what you want to achieve and what's right and what's wrong, but also flexible in your approach to life. So thinking outside the box, and especially with language learning, that language it's a means to an end. The language is a tool. It's not a language without a purpose behind it is nothing. You've got to, what's the language for? And so how do we use this language in everyday life? And so thinking as a teacher, okay, how are these kids going to learn or use this language? It's not just about Japanese, it's not just about German or whatever it is. It's about, okay, what are you going to do with it? And so perhaps being flexible with incorporating with law or with maths or whatever it is, in different ways, so that the kids can use those languages in real situations and see how it's going to help them in their later life, and also encouraging them to have a purpose behind the language as well. So I think that's probably the first one.
Wonderful.
The second one is never fear and never worry. And there's plenty of things to worry about in life, but never worry about anything, and just do your best, and that's all we can do. And so as a teacher, we sometimes, perhaps I was different, but we sometimes question, are we good enough to be doing this? And
self-doubt creeps in.
The self-doubt, and our confidence gets knocked. Perhaps a teacher comes and says something, or perhaps a student, or perhaps a parent, or whatever it is, and then we start doubting our worth and our abilities. And so if we've done our best, that's all we can do. And we're in this position for a reason, and to have confidence and never worry about life and about anything, that things always have a way of looking after itself. And the last question was any advice for someone who maybe has got a Kanji Pro in them, but follow your passion. So everyone's got a passion and a greater purpose and a greater calling in life, and just believe in that, and every day take little steps towards achieving that greater passion. And if you don't know what the greater passion is, then often, and this is of course often about passing on to children and to young people, often it's in doing the things that we love. And if you follow what feels good and what feels great, as long as it's not for selfish things, we could be doing drugs or something like that, could be feeling very good, but that's not a good thing to follow.
Quite right,
Perhaps this isn't the place to talk about those sort of things, but follow your passion and what feels good. And generally what really feels good is making a difference for other people. And so to be brave and to know as a teacher that we are role models, and that we are called also to step out into outside our comfort zone, and our children, our students and people around us see us being brave and see us following our passion and seeing us living a big life, and then they want to emulate that, because ultimately the teachers in this world have more influence on the leaders of tomorrow than anyone else. I remember my teachers. I am who I am thanks to the teachers in my life.
That's right.
And so I just encourage everyone to follow that passion and to live a big life.
Awesome. Fantastic pieces of advice. Thank you so much for your time today, Michael. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Is there a place where people can go to find out more about you, or to, obviously locally in New Zealand, they can get Kanji Pro from the resource room, but internationally, if we have listeners who are interested in this, where can they go?
Yeah, I'm online, so Michael MacKinven, you can track me down, and KanjiPro.com, you can find the book and a little bit of information there.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Michael MacKinven. I really appreciated a few of the things he said. In particular, I thought it was fantastic how he liked the fact that it changed his worldview, being in another culture and learning another language, and that he was able to apply these cross-cultural experiences and learnings to his everyday business life, and he thinks he's the better for it, and I'm sure that's absolutely the case. If you appreciate this podcast, I'd really love for you to leave us a review in iTunes. You can also see us at www.languagefuel.com or in www.resourceroom.co.nz. Ka kite anō. Thank you for listening to the Language Fuel podcast. You can navigate to the show notes and links via our homepage at www.languagefuel.com. See you next time.